Welcome to the Virginia Insider Podcast, where we get an inside look at the people and places that set our coastal region apart from the rest of the world. Today, I am your host, Chandler Nunnally, and our guest today is one of the great broadcasting talents from our area. He is an accomplished jazz musician and educator and the president of Hampton Roads Jazz Incorporated. From Sinnett In Session, the one and only Jae Sinnett joins us today. Jae, welcome to the inaugural episode of Virginia Insider.
Glad to be here, Chandler.
Dude, it is great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
The timing is impeccable. You were very recently awarded with a Veer Award for your cover of Frankenstein. Tell us about that experience.
Well, Frankenstein, it's an interesting thing because the first music I played professionally was rock, right? Rock, soul, funk, psychedelic funk, Sly and the Family Stone, Parliament Funkadelic, and then the blues rock bands like Cream, Led Zeppelin, Vanilla Fudge, and a host of others. And I thought about the songs that really presented me challenges from a drumming perspective that really drove me crazy, And so it's kind of a full circle project. So I decided to go back and say, okay, I want to get away from straight up jazz just for a little while and go back and revisit some of this rock stuff, but play the tunes instrumentally and keep the integrity of the tune, because these tunes, man, I mean, they're so well known. I mean, people who like these songs know every break, every rhythm, every melody, every solo, whatever. So if you stray too far from tunes like this, you get yourself in trouble. So what I decided to do with a piece like Frankenstein, we played the song as Edgar Winters recorded it. The only variation in the actual song we did, I took the first two bars of the song and changed the meter. We played it at 7/8 instead of 4/4, right? So da 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 da. So we took a beat off the measure, and it's funny because I saw some people. My version was playing, and some people started dancing to it when that beat dropped.
Yeah, you're thrown off immediately.
Something happened to the beat. And so that was the only slight change in the original version. And then I wrote a whole new section for the improv. We wrote a whole different, more jazz-flavored improvisational section as an addition, not to change anything that Edgar did. But when you think about the concept of how he recorded that song, the song used to be called the Two Drummer Song. And it was kind of a jam that the Edgar Winter Group used either to warm up or just to take up time or just to have a piece of music where everybody in the band can take a solo and shine, right? So it's obviously 25, 30 minutes long. And Rick Derringer was the producer of the album They Only Come Out at Night and suggested that Edgar record Frankenstein. They couldn't record it as a 25, 30-minute jam. So, but that's the only way they were used to playing it, right? And so a lot of editing had to take place. And if there was ever a song if there's ever an award for the most edited song, it would have to go to Frankenstein, right?
Yeah.
And I know now, where I am musically, I can go back and listen to these things. There's so much editing. And when you really think about it, the old days with the 2-inch tape and how these projects were recorded, the slicing, the story goes that there was tape all over the studio. And eventually they pieced everything together, and the drummer at the time, I can't think of his name right now, blurted out, it's like Frankenstein, like putting together Frankenstein, creating this monster. And that's exactly how they recorded it. They recorded it in sections.
Yeah.
So being a drummer, and there's drum solo in Frankenstein, I decided to do the arrangement on that. And I'm grateful and pleased that people like it. It was. I have never played the song live as it's arranged all the way through, but we will at some point, and I'm dreading that because from a couple of different perspectives, because the endurance of how I'm playing the drum part, the shifts in the feels and the time and things like that. It's just a bear to do, man. But I'm glad people dig it.
Let me ask you about another track off of your album, the Blur the Lines project, which is full of your and different interpretations of really popular rock songs that you sort of turned into these fusion tracks. Tom Sawyer, one of the most popular drum tracks of all time, by Neil Peart. Your take on it is decidedly different. The fills are not all the same. As a drummer myself, I'm listening to it. I can see Neil playing it in my head. Part of the fun of listening to it is hearing what you do differently. But it's a big swing, creatively. Is that a choice that you thought about, or is that something that, was just natural? Of course you weren't going to play it the same.
Well, there are a few interesting things about Tom Sawyer. First of all, the song wasn't around during that period that I was studying Frankenstein and Hush and those tracks. That came in the 80s, as you know, right? By that point, I was already playing jazz professionally. And so why Tom Sawyer? Well, when Neil passed, right, I got asked to play because the people, John Coleman and some other folks who knew my history, wanted me to participate in the tribute to Neil, right? But it was, I can't even remember what song it was, what Rush tune. I can't remember the name of the tune, but it wasn't Tom Sawyer. Mm-hmm. But when I played it, I started listening to Rush that I had never heard before. Yeah. But I remember being, sitting in with a band, a rock-oriented band back in the 80s, and they wanted to play Tom Sawyer. And I was like, man, let me listen to this thing. And then that's when I was first introduced to Neil. So I thought, well, you know what? After all this Rush I've been listening to learn that tribute piece, that I can't remember what it was now, I said, I think I want to do Tom Sawyer, right? And Neil is so iconic, man. It's like, again, the same thing I was talking about. It's like you start messing with these guys.
Yeah.
Like John Coleman, he's the authority on Rush, man. It's like, so I figured, okay, if I record Tom Sawyer, I'm going to send this to him because he's going to pick this thing apart, right? So I kept, like, for example, Neil plays, I played it. Not using the 16th notes. Right. And I did in some of the spots, but little subtle things. Yeah. And then I extended the drum solo break.
You did.
A little bit, maybe 4 extra bars of that drum solo break to get a little further away from Neil's ideas. But there were some of the licks that he did.
The triplet thing.
The triplet thing, yeah. I did some of those. Just to let people know, hey, I did listen.
But you put it at like a different spot within
right.
Yeah.
And his kit his setup is huge, enormous.
You play with a decidedly smaller setup.
I use a much smaller kit, but so I'm still trying to get the same effect. Yeah. But still have melodic movement like he had, right? But the bottom line is, I was more focused on the feel of the tune. It's a little funkier than how Rush did it, slightly. Yeah. And then we expanded the guitar solo too, Yeah. With Jason Kell playing the guitar.
Brilliant guitarist.
Yeah.
From Hampton Roads as well.
And so that was my thinking with that, to pay tribute to Neil, because I grew to like the guy, man. I mean, I really respected him. I saw him in the Buddy Rich tribute where he was playing jazz. He was playing jazz. I said, man, and then I read some of his writings. He was a brilliant man. I mean, he really was. So I said, well, I think I want to do Tom Sawyer. That's how that came about.
No. Man, it is great to be able to talk to you in depth about your drumming technique. This is the kind of thing that a podcast is great for. And it's great to have you on the first episode. You were the first name that I thought of when we started the Virginia Insider podcast. today, on the day we're recording this, I also talked to you on our television program, Coast Live, for about 5 minutes, and that was like a speed round.
I don't even remember what I said on
You're
this,
right. And when we finished that, you were telling me a story from early in your broadcasting career when you got to talk to Herbie Hancock. And I actually had to cut that conversation short because I had to run out and go back and do something for my television show. And I want to ask you to tell me that story because it was so emblematic of the world of broadcasting and a brilliant peek into what your life is like on this other front. So can you provide some insight into that story?
Absolutely. Well, Herbie Hancock, of course, one of the great innovative jazz pianists, or pianist period, had a great stint with the innovative quintet with Miles Davis in the mid-'60s with Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, Tony Williams, Ron Carter, Wayne Shorter. I said Miles, of course, Miles Davis. And Herbie was coming to town doing something here. This is years ago. And so I got a call from the presenters saying, hey, man, we're bringing Herbie. Would you like to interview Herbie? I'm like, interview Herbie Hancock? Absolutely, right? And so they said, well, okay, we'll get his management to contact you. So they did. The management contacts, you can interview him, but you only get 5 minutes. Okay, I'm like, okay, all right, that's fine, right?
You'll take it.
I'll take it, right? 3 or 4 days later, they write me back just to make sure you know we're only doing 5 minutes of this interview. I'm like, I got it, no problem. And it was like the day before the interview, I get another message. Remember, 5 minutes. You only have 5. I got it, dude. I have this. We're good. And they gave me a number. He'll be in some hotel somewhere, and he'll answer the phone, and then you can talk for 5 minutes. So the day of, I call Herbie, and it's like this. I hear this. Hello. I'm like, Herbie Hancock? Yeah. Who's this? I'm like, Herbie, this is Jae Sinnett with WHRV FM here to. Oh, am I supposed to talk to you or interview or something? I'm like, yeah, man. He says, okay, all right. What do you want to talk about? I'm like, okay, well, since I only have 5 minutes with you, let's start it this way. When you were with the Miles Davis Quintet, the foundational aspect of what you paid the most attention to was either, I'm guessing, Tony Williams' definitive K Zildjian ride beat or Ron Carter's swinging, repetitive pulse of his quarter note swinging bass line. Which would you say you followed more? Silence.
That's a hell of a first question, Jay.
Silence. And I did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Silence. And then I hear, can you please repeat that? What did you just say? Repeat that question? So I did. I repeated the question. Pause again. And then, you know what? Wait a minute. Let me sit up here. I can hear him, the bed squeaking or whatever he was sitting on. He sat up. He said, okay, now ask me that again. So I did. And he went off into this long thing, man. And I literally, hour and a half later, I was still talking to Herbie.
Wow.
And I had to cut the interview off.
Wow.
You know, because I approached him from his world, right? It's interesting when musicians feel, he didn't know I was a musician for starters, so, but when I went into his world, it made him feel like completely connected, right? And I learned that years ago that most musicians, stars like that, when they do so many of these interviews, they get a radio person on there. They're not thinking that this guy's a musician, right? So they're just thinking this is some jock and just wants to do something for some ratings or whatever. And so I learned to just go into the world. Gary Burton, the great vibraphonist, one of his last groups had vibraphone, guitar, piano, bass, and drums. So you had all these harmonic flavored instruments. The first question I asked him, which was kind of a similar thing, the management told me you only have a little bit of time to interview him. I said, Gary, when you have vibraphone and you play 4 mallet vibes, not 2, when you play 4 mallet vibraphone and you have a guitar player and then you have a piano player, don't you think that's an harmonic accident waiting to happen? Silence again. And then he bust out laughing. And it's the same thing. The interview went on for almost an hour.
Wow.
So you get into their world.
Yeah.
You figure out how to do that. You get into their world, and you see a completely different side.
So what I should have started with today was, what's your problem with smooth jazz? Why is it not jazz just because it doesn't swing, man? Because I love smooth jazz. I know it doesn't swing, but why is it not jazz? I know you have a problem with this.
No, I don't have a problem with smooth jazz. I did a special recording special, man, with Everett Harp, saxophonist, guitarist Peter White.
Wow.
Heavy smooth jazzers.
Peter White's legit.
Yeah. I mean, so is Everett Harp.
Yeah.
And I had a blast playing with these guys, man. I think the problem I have, I know the problem I have with jazz. First of all, the branding, right? The branding came up, and the story goes, there was this administrative person in this office and a station in Chicago, not a musician, not a music educator, just the administrator. And she heard something, and she goes, "Oh, this sounds really smooth, Pat. Like it's sort of like smooth jazz," and it became this coined term. That's the truth. I mean, that's a true story.
That's the origin of the nomenclature.
That's really how this came to be.
Yeah.
And it's kind of smooth is kind of an extension of the quiet storm. Well, the first thing you do, you look at the differences, right? Jazz is swung, right? The eighth note is swung, right? Jazz is improvisational based, collective improvisation. Smooth is more R&B based, right? You have some improvisation, you have saxophones, playing things. The harmonic structures of smooth things aren't really in line so much with jazz. But smooth jazz is really designed to have the effect of R&B, because when it's designed for dancing and partying and that whole vibe. Jazz is for listening. It's a listening art. Like people go to a concert hall and hear an orchestra play. They sit and they listen. So, and the intentions of the music are very, very, very different. And I've never really come out blasting smooth jazz. And people think because I say, like, a doctor, for example, came to me and said, "Jay, don't you think Grover Washington Jr. was the greatest saxophone player ever?" And I said, "No." "Oh man, why are you putting down these artists like that?" And I'm like, "Why are you asking me a question that you don't want to hear the answer to? You asked me if he was the greatest saxophone player to ever live." And I said, "No, I don't think that." So then it comes out, "Well, Jay hates smooth jazz." No, I don't. I just want people to understand the history.
It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And the intentions are different. One is for commercial success.
Of course.
One is for an artistic achievement.
I do think there is also the misconception really possibly becomes harmful when you've got something being marketed as a local jazz festival and the majority of the artists there are smooth jazz artists.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I am the executive director of Hampton Roads Jazz Incorporated.
Yes.
And one of our objectives was to produce a real jazz festival. Mm-hmm. And we succeeded. We produced the Phoebus Jazz Festival, which is a real jazz festival. We have jazz festivals in the Hampton Roads area, the Hampton Jazz Festival, which is R&B and smooth jazz laced. There's no jazz on the festival. It used to be. Thelonious Monk, Cannonball Adderley, all these great jazz artists played the festival decades ago. But they wanted to put it into the Coliseum. They wanted to give, the city tax revenue, right? Jazz doesn't belong in the Coliseum, right? So then you have the Town Point Park Fest. They do a great job with their events down there. But again, that's smooth jazz, R&B laced. I'm not putting that down. I'm just saying you're not hearing much jazz, So we want to have a jazz festival where you hear real jazz, right? So people will say, "Well, Jay, you're going to struggle with this." So we'll just do it smaller, right? We're not trying to get 10,000 people out to hear what we do. We're going for hundreds, right? Per night, a nice smaller venue seats 400 or 500 people, have it over 3 nights. And we were 80% full for the 3 nights for our jazz festival with no marketing budget. Right? No marketing budget, because most people, if you know anything about nonprofits, will not fund first-year nonprofits. They consider you as startups. So we couldn't get really grant funding. We had minimal sponsorship, but we made it happen, and we're trying to do something for jazz. The festival, we have our jazz lecture series, which is happening right now, because we also have an educational initiative program that's attached to the organization to try to educate kids, aspiring musicians that want to learn something about this music, learn the history. So we're having these lectures at the Hampton History Museum. The next one is this Saturday, 7:30. Extraordinary saxophonist, Dr. Rahsaan Barber. He's going to give his lecture on John Coltrane, and then there's the quartet there. I will be playing with him, and we'll play the music of Coltrane. And then on the 20th, Dr. Weldon Hill, pianist, will do a trio. His lecture's on Duke Ellington. He did his dissertation on Duke Ellington, so we'll play some of the music of Ellington. And then on the 27th, I will be the last lecturer, and my lecture will be on the rhythmic sensibilities of jazz music. So, and these lectures are free and open to the public. They're at 7 p.m. on each night of the lecture, and we encourage students to come out and participate and learn something, man. And the average community, there are a lot of people, and this is what I've learned in doing my radio show for so many years. There are a lot of more people that are really curious about jazz, but when they tune into it, they don't get it, right? The rhythm, the improv, they struggle with it. So they want to learn more about it. So I did this research, permit me to say this about my show. I did a research on why, since we're non-commercial broadcasting, we have to fundraise. Why do people contribute to my show? And over 80% said it's because of what they learn. Interestingly enough, it wasn't the music, it was what they learned about the music. So we as broadcasters can't underestimate the benefit of giving out educational information to our listeners, right? Because there's more interest in that area than we may think. And we're always taught as broadcasters, hey man, watch the time that you speak. You don't talk too much, My show is like, they want me to talk. Yeah. I don't. I mean, I know that I have a line. I don't cross that line, but I make sure I give them the information because it's the information that keeps them coming back.
Let me ask you this on that point, and as we sort of wrap things up here, for so many people who love the arts, whether they're former performers or just passionate about consuming music or any other form of creativity, for so many of us as time goes on, maybe we get absorbed in, creating a family or our careers. That part of our life kind of gets put on the back burner. You are somebody who has been very successful in making that the forefront.
I never had a family. No.
But what would you say to somebody who wants to keep that creative spark alive in their life?
Chandler, it's no different than you finding a passion that you want to do. If you want to be a CPA, if you want to be an attorney, if you want to be a doctor, you are going to have to sacrifice something. Here's a great story that will answer your get to the point of your question. When I was teaching at the Governor's Gifted Program, one of my students at that time was the prodigy Justin Coughlin. Right, Justin was 15 or 16 at the time.
Incredible pianist.
And yes, he is. And many times during the band rehearsals, Justin would be sitting at the piano like this. Oh my God. Just bored senselessly, waiting for the other kids to learn their parts. And then one day, one of the students asked me, said, Mr. Sinnett, can I talk to you after class? I said, sure. And he comes up to me and says, why is Justin so much better than us? Why can't we? I said, all right, what did you do last night? Just out of curiosity. He goes, well, me and my girlfriend, we went down to the boardwalk and we did some skateboarding down there. And then we went gaming. We did some gaming. Then I came home, did some homework, and then I went to bed. I said, okay. Good. Here's what Justin was doing last night. I was doing my radio show. Middle of my radio show, Justin calls me. Mr. Sinnett, that monk piece, the Thelonious Monk piece you just played. He goes, can you hear and tell me if I got this right, over the phone while I'm doing my show, right? And I'm like, okay, Justin. So I turned down the in-studio monitor, so I'm listening. He's playing this. I said, that's it, my man. You got it. So while you were down there skateboarding and gaming, Justin was at home woodshedding, man. And that's what you have to do. To get great at anything, you got to sacrifice something. You got to give up something. And the older we get, we have more liabilities, we have mortgages, we have a different level of responsibility. Ideally, you want to be able to succeed in what you love, like your passion, if it's broadcasting, if it's music. But I always teach my students to have a plan B. Have a viable plan B. Like, for example, if you go to college, maybe consider music education versus music performance, because then you can always teach.
Right.
At least you're still around music. You have that option. Yeah. So you'd be amazed how many kids don't think about it that way. I said, I know plenty of performance majors that can't get gigs. But if you have an education major or degree, then you can always teach. You can have your summers off. You get your benefits. You can start a 401 plan. There are things that are really important about having a plan B if you want to be an artist.
Or you can be a failed musician like me and then become a broadcaster, and you get to talk to people like Jae Sinnett.
You are not a failed musician. It's just your career. You got to a responsible place where you felt you have to do what you have to do to make a living.
Thank you. Yes, sir. That is true.
And at some point, you will be sitting around. This is how this works. You'll be sitting around thinking, I want to practice again. I want to get back into playing again, and not give this up.
Right.
But it becomes part of your circle at that point, right? And it's a beautiful thing, man, because then you get to a place where one feeds the other.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Jae Sinnett, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the inaugural episode of Virginia Insider. Not that you need to plug yourself, but please, I would be honored if you would plug your radio show and where people can find your work.
Okay. I want to plug more than my radio show, though.
Plug it all.
My radio show is called my jazz radio show, Sinnett In Session, Monday through Thursday nights from 9 until 1, Saturday mornings now from midnight till 4 for the insomniacs, Sunday afternoons from 1 until 5. And I also host and produce the R&B Chronicles, classic soul music, Friday nights from 7 until 8, both on WHRV FM 89.5 Public Media for Hampton Roads. I'm also executive director of HR Jazz. Please visit hrjazz.org to learn more about the organization, how you can support what we're doing. If you want to learn more about the music, you can see what we're up to. And check out my Blur the Lines project. It's brand new. You can hear tracks on YouTube, Jae Sinnett, the Blur the Lines project. And support your area musicians too, man, because there's some hard work and great talent here in Hampton Roads.
Hold the record up so that people can see it here. Show it to our two-shot right there.
And it's an album.
Yeah, it's a real vinyl record.
A real vinyl record.
You can purchase.
Yes.
In real life.
And
you can also stream it for the record, too, though.
If anybody's interested, just drop me an email, jjazz@yahoo.com, jaejazz@yahoo.com, and I'll let you know how you get copy of the album or the CD. We have CDs, and it's available on all the downloading streams like iTunes and such, if you want to digitally get a copy of it.
Yeah, I absolutely second that. Once you hear the cover of Tom Sawyer, you won't want to turn the rest of the album off. Jae,
I was afraid to do that, man. I was like,
It's very brave.
Yeah, it takes some brass to do something like that.
Oh, but you did the thing, man, for sure. The Virginia Insider Podcast is presented by WTKR and WGNT here in Norfolk, Virginia. Once again, I have been your host, Chandler Nunnally. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.